Hello, I'm Gordon Lang, editor of CameraLabs.com. I'd like to give you a brief video tour around the Sony 75-300mm lens. Here it is, the 75-300mm. It's an entry-level telephoto zoom lens designed for use on Sony Alpha digital SLRs, and I've got it mounted here on an Alpha A100 body. Now this isn't a DT format lens, so it is in fact fully compatible with a full frame body should Sony ever produce one of those in the future, but you'll most commonly see this lens bundled as a twin lens kit with the A100 and the standard DT 18-70mm. And if you are familiar with that kit lens, then you'll immediately recognise this one as a Sony model. The design is pretty much the same and so is the build quality. Here it is, zoomed all the way out to 75mm and now zoomed all the way in to 300mm, and you'll see that the barrel does extend quite far, but that's par for the course for a telephoto zoom. The important thing to note is that the zoom ring itself is pretty smooth, it doesn't catch, and there's also no concerns of creep here where the lens barrel can extend or retract under its own weight. Like most Sony lenses though, these very fine grooves on the actual zoom ring itself can attract quite a lot of dust, so you may want to stay on top of that. Now I'd like to show you the autofocus performance with this lens, and what I'm going to do is bring it right up to the camera here, and I'd like you to take particular attention on the actual manual focusing ring here at the end of the lens and also the end element here, which is where you'd be mounting a filter. Now if I autofocus this, you'll see a couple of things happened there. Now the actual manual focusing ring here did turn, so if you were holding it you'd notice a bit of nudge, although to be fair it's towards the end of the barrel so that's not really going to be an issue. But perhaps a bigger issue is that the actual end element did rotate while I was focusing there. And that's going to prove pretty annoying if you're using a polarizing filter. You'll also notice that it made quite a lot of noise while it was focusing and it wasn't particularly quick. That's because this, like most Sony lenses, uses a built-in autofocus motor that's actually in the body itself, and it's much slower and noisier than say the USM or SWM focusing systems of Canon and Nikon's lenses. But anyway, that's enough of the physical tour. Let's see what you can actually do with this lens in practice. To demonstrate the 75-300mm lens's coverage, we're going to start off with this picture. This was taken with the standard DT 18-70mm kit lens, zoomed all the way out to 18mm, and it's capturing a nice broad view of this landscape. Now here's the kit lens zoomed into 70mm, and as you can see, it's capturing a tighter view. Now we'll switch to the 75-300, zoomed all the way out to 75mm, and you'll see there is so little difference between 70 and 75, there's really nothing to worry about. Essentially, this lens does take over where the kit lens stops. But more importantly, it does zoom in a great deal beyond this point. Here it is, zoomed all the way into 300mm, so that's working at an effective focal length of 450mm, and you can see that it's really capturing a very, very tight area in the middle of the frame. So if you had these two lenses, it would offer you the following range. Here again, the kit lens zoomed all the way out to 18mm, and now the telephoto zoom all the way into 300mm. Telephoto zooms like this are great for shooting portraits, and you don't have to zoom all the way in either. This picture was taken with the lens fully zoomed out to 75mm and at relatively close range, and you can see it's an absolute doddle to throw that background out of focus. And if you want that background to be even more abstract and even more blurred, just step back a bit and zoom in that bit more. While you may think that a wide-angle lens is better suited to landscape photography, you can actually get some really nice effects with a telephoto zoom by picking out particular areas. This picture of the top of a mountain range was taken with the lens fully zoomed into 300mm, and it's allowed us to really pick out those peaks there. We've even captured a little aeroplane in that frame too. The only thing you have to watch out for though is that this stabilization is built into the body, not into the lens, so the view through the viewfinder can appear quite shaky when you've got this lens fully zoomed in. The Sony 75-300mm is a perfect complement for the kit lens, and that's why it's so popular to be sold as a twin lens kit. It takes over pretty much where the kit lens leaves off and delivers fair quality. Now you've got to remember this is a budget lens, so you shouldn't expect miracles from it. It can be a little bit soft in the corners, especially zoomed out to 75mm, so when you are working at that focal length you're probably best sticking with the kit lens instead. But where this one excels obviously is when you want to get much closer to your subject. It's also good that you've got those anti-shake facilities built into the Sony Alpha body, although again in practice we found that it gave us about 1.5 to 2 stops of compensation, but that really depends on the photographer and the conditions in question. Now there are much higher quality telephoto zooms out there from Sony and other manufacturers, but if you want a good budget entry-level model, then the 75-300 is certainly worth considering. And if you're buying an A100 from scratch, then it's definitely well worth looking at the twin lens kit. As always, if you want to see more sample images taken with this lens and the full results for it compared to the kit lens to see how this performs where the other one leaves off, then head on over to our full review at www.cameralabs.com.